I never expected to see Lauren again. Not here, not now, not after she destroyed what was left of my dignity 5 years ago. Yet there she was, elegantly dressed in a black cocktail dress, her champagne glass catching the light as she laughed. With former classmates, completely unaware that the company hosting this alumni gala belonged to me. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Our high school reunion committee couldn't have chosen a more ironic venue. The Grand Summit Hotel, the crown jewel of my hospitality group, had been selected to host our 15-year reunion. I initially planned to skip the event entirely. Old wounds, buried ambitions, and the ghost of a failed marriage weren't exactly compelling reasons to attend. But when my assistant mentioned the venue booking, curiosity got the better of me. Arrived late, deliberately. The grand ballroom was already filled with familiar faces, made slightly unfamiliar by time. Receding hairlines, broader waistlines, and the subtle marks of adulthood etched onto once youthful features. I stood in the doorway for a moment, observing from a distance, wondering if coming here had been a mistake. That's when I saw her, Lauren Parker. No, Lauren Miller now, according to the gossip that occasionally reached me. She had remarried just a year after our divorce was finalized. She looked different, yet exactly the same. Her auburn hair was shorter, more sophisticated, but she still had that distinctive laugh that once made my heart race for entirely different reasons. I watched as she mingled effortlessly, moving from group to group with practiced charm. She always had been the social butterfly, comfortable in crowds in ways I never was. That was part of our problem, one of many. "Mr. Reeves, I didn't expect to see you here tonight." I turned to find Melissa Chen, the hotel's event manager, approaching. With a professional smile, "Just checking in," I said, keeping my voice low. "Everything running smoothly?" "Absolutely perfect, sir," though the reunion committee had no idea. She glanced toward the crowd meaningfully. "Let's keep it that way," I replied. Melissa nodded and discreetly stepped away. I had been careful to keep a low profile in my hometown, despite my success. My company, Summit Hospitality Group, had grown exponentially over the past decade, but I deliberately maintained my privacy. Few people from my past knew exactly what I'd built. Tonight would change that, though not in the way I had anticipated. I made my way to the bar, ordering a whiskey neat. From my vantage point, I could observe without being immediately noticed. The irony wasn't lost on me. 5 years ago, at our 10-year reunion, I had been the one desperately trying to appear successful while Lauren showcased her new executive husband. That night had been the final blow to what remained of our relationship. Lauren and I had married young right after college. We were the classic story, high school sweethearts who managed to make it through university still believing in forever. I was pursuing my business degree while working on a hotel management internship. She was climbing the corporate ladder at a marketing firm. We had dreams, plans, a small apartment in the city that we filled with second-hand furniture and genuine hope. Then came the recession. The hospitality company I worked for downsized dramatically. My position, junior and expendable, was among the first to go. 3 months of unemployment stretched into 6, then 9. Lauren's salary kept us afloat, but barely. "It's just temporary," I kept saying, working on business plans late into the night, convinced that I could start my own company if I could just secure some investment. Lauren was supportive at first, then patient, then tolerant, and finally, resentful. "Dreaming doesn't pay the bills, Jack," she snapped one night after coming home to find me working on another business proposal instead of following up on the corporate positions she'd forwarded me. "This isn't just dreaming," I argued, gesturing to the detailed plans spread across our dining table. "I've identified a gap in the boutique hotel market. If I can secure even modest funding, if, she interrupted, throwing her keys onto the counter. We're drowning in student loans and credit card debt, and you're talking about hypotheticals. Meanwhile, Thomas offered me a transfer to the Chicago office with a 20% raise. I froze. Chicago? When were you going to mention this? Her silence told me everything. She'd already made up her mind. You should take it, I said finally, the words like ash in my mouth. I already did, she replied. I start next month. She left for Chicago without me. We tried long distance for 6 months before she called to tell me she'd met someone else, her boss, Thomas Miller. The divorce was quick, clinical. She got Chicago and a new life. I got our old apartment and the remains of my self-worth. A year later, just after finalizing her new marriage, came our 10-year high school reunion. I almost didn't go, but pride is a powerful motivator. I had just secured my first modest investment to purchase a small, struggling boutique hotel. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Lauren arrived with Thomas, dripping in designer labels and confidence. He was everything I wasn't at the time, established, polished, connected. I watched them work the room, her hand possessively on his arm, as she introduced him to our former classmates. We inevitably collided near the buffet table, the encounter as awkward as it was painful. "Jack," she said, her smile not quite reaching. Her eyes, "Good to see you." "Lauren," I nodded. "Congratulations on the wedding." Thomas extended his hand, his grip deliberately firm. "Thomas Miller, I've heard a lot about you." "I doubt that," I replied, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Lauren's eyes narrowed slightly. "How are things? I heard you were working on some project." Before I could answer, a former classmate, drunk on nostalgia and open-bar courage, approached. "Lauren Parker, homecoming queen herself," he slurred. "And Jack Reeves, the guy who is going to build hotels all over the world. How'd that work out, buddy?" The silence that followed was excruciating. Lauren's lips curled into a small, pitying smile. "Jack's still figuring things out," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "Not everyone finds their path right." "Away," Thomas chuckled, his arm sliding around her waist. "Some dreams are better left as dreams, eh, Jack?" I stood there, humiliation burning through me like acid. Lauren leaned closer, lowering her voice. "You were always chasing fantasies, Jack. That's why we couldn't work. I needed someone who lived in the real world." Her words cut deeper than any knife could have. I managed a tight smile, excused myself, and left the reunion early. In my car, hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, I made a promise to myself. I would never allow myself to be humiliated like that again. That night changed everything. The smoldering ambition I'd been nurturing erupted into an all-consuming fire. I poured every ounce of energy into my small hotel, transforming it from a struggling property into a distinctive boutique experience. I worked 18-hour days, learning every aspect of the business from the ground up. Within 2 years, that single hotel became profitable enough to secure additional funding. I acquired a second property, then a third. Each one I renovated with meticulous attention to detail, creating unique experiences that quickly garnered attention in the industry. By year 3, Summit Hospitality Group was gaining recognition for innovation in the boutique hotel space. By year 4, we had expanded to 12 properties across the country. And now, 5 years after that humiliating reunion encounter, Summit was a billion-dollar hospitality empire with 37 properties across North America and Europe, with aggressive expansion plans for Asia. And Lauren had no idea. As I sipped my whiskey, watching her laugh and mingle across the ballroom in my hotel under my chandeliers, I felt none of the satisfaction I had once imagined. The revenge fantasy I'd harbored during those early days of building my company seemed hollow now, childish even. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I was about to finish my drink and leave when I heard her voice behind me. Jack? Jack Reeves? I turned slowly, meeting the eyes I once knew better than my own. Lauren stood there, her expression a mixture of surprise and the practiced social warmth she had perfected over the years. I thought that was you, she said, her smile bright, but her eyes evaluating, calculating. It's been, what, 5 years? 5 years, I confirmed, keeping my expression neutral. How are you, Lauren? Good, really good. She glanced around the opulent ballroom. Beautiful venue, isn't it? The committee really outdid themselves. I nodded, taking another sip of my whiskey. It's impressive. Lauren's gaze lingered on my tailored suit, the subtle glint of my platinum watch. I could see questions forming behind her eyes. You look... Well, she ventured. What have you been up to these days? Before I could answer, a hotel staff member approached discreetly. Excuse me, Mr. Reeves, she said, but Mr. Zhao is on the line regarding the Singapore acquisition. He says it's urgent. Lauren's eyes widened slightly as the staff member handed me a sleek phone with the Summit logo prominently displayed. Thank you, Jessica, I said calmly. Tell him I'll call back in 5 minutes. As Jessica nodded and walked away, I turned back to Lauren, whose expression had shifted from casual curiosity to dawning realization. You, she began, her eyes darting around the ballroom, taking in the Summit logo subtly incorporated into the decor. You work for Summit? I allowed myself a small smile, the first genuine one of the evening. Not exactly, I replied, finishing my whiskey and setting the glass down on the bar. I am Summit. Lauren's composure, something she had always prided herself on, fractured visibly. Her perfectly manicured hand tightened around her champagne. He flute as she processed what I'd just revealed. You own Summit Hospitality Group? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, watching the calculations happening behind her eyes. Summit had been featured in Forbes last quarter. Our rapid expansion and innovative approach to luxury hospitality had made headlines in the business world. If she hadn't seen those articles, someone in her circle certainly had. 37 properties across 3 continents, I said casually, with 8 more under development. Lauren swallowed hard, her throat bobbing with the effort. I had no idea. Few people from back home do, I replied. I've kept a low profile here. An awkward silence stretched between us. I could have left it there, should have perhaps, but something compelled me to continue. How's Thomas? I asked, signaling the bartender for another drink. Lauren's smile tightened imperceptibly. He's fine. Couldn't make it tonight. Work commitments. In Chicago. I nodded, accepting my fresh whiskey. Still with Anderson Marketing. Actually, no, she said, her voice carefully controlled. He started his own agency 2 years ago. Impressive, I said. Though her tone suggested otherwise, Lauren sipped her champagne, clearly gathering herself. The Lauren I remembered never stayed rattled for long. Sure enough, within moments, her confident demeanor returned, her armor sliding back into place. I always knew you'd do well, Jack, she said, her voice honeyed with selective memory. You were always so driven, so focused on your goals. I nearly choked on my whiskey. That's not quite how I remember your assessment. Her smile faltered just for a moment. Well, we were both young, going through difficult times. Before I could respond, a man in an expensive but slightly dated suit approached, clapping me on the shoulder with uncomfortable familiarity. Jack Reeves, man of the hour, he boomed. It was Derek Porter, former football captain and current real estate agent, according to his name tag. Heard the rumors you own this place. The whole chain, actually. That true? I nodded, acutely aware of Lauren's eyes on me. Unbelievable, Derek continued, oblivious to the tension. Our Jack Reeves, the quiet guy with the big plans, nobody believed. Lauren, can you believe this? Your ex-husband's a freaking hotel tycoon. Lauren's smile was glacial. Yes, Jack was just telling me about his success. Derek grinned, clearly enjoying the awkwardness he was creating. Talk about a glow-up, huh? From getting dumped to becoming one of the richest guys from our class. He turned to me conspiratorially. Bet you never imagined back at our 10-year reunion that you'd own the venue for our 15-year? Life takes unexpected turns, I replied evenly, though my pulse quickened at the memory of that humiliating night. Derek laughed too loudly. That's putting it mildly. Hey, Lauren, remember how Thomas was going on about Jack's little hotel project? Called it, what was it? A pipe dream for people who can't cut it in the real business world. Man, if he could see this place. Lauren's face paled slightly. Derek, I think someone was looking for you at the photo booth. Really? Who? Derek asked, but Lauren was already nudging him away. Just go check, she insisted, before turning back to me with a forced smile. Derek always did lack social grace. I took another sip of whiskey, letting the burn in my throat distract me from the rising tension. He's just saying what everyone's thinking. Lauren straightened, smoothing down her dress in a gesture I recognized all too well, her physical reset when conversations turned uncomfortable. I should circulate, she said, her voice professional, distant. It was good seeing you, Jack. Congratulations on all your success. As she turned to leave, I surprised myself by speaking. Lauren! She paused, looking back with carefully constructed poise. What happened with Thomas's agency, I asked, intuition telling me there was more to the story. Something flashed across her face. Pain, perhaps, or anger, before her mask slipped back into place. Just the usual startup challenges, nothing we can't handle. She walked away before I could ask anything else, her back straight, her steps measured. I watched her rejoin a group of former cheerleaders, immediately engaging in animated conversation, as if our exchange had never happened. Jessica, the staff member who had interrupted us earlier, approached discreetly. Mr. Reeves, Mr. Zhao is still waiting. Should I tell him you'll call tomorrow instead? I shook my head. No, I'll take it. Now, please have a quiet room prepared. As I followed Jessica out of the ballroom, I caught Lauren watching me from across the room, her expression unreadable. 5 years ago, I would have given anything to see that look on her face, to know she was witnessing my success after dismissing my potential. Now I felt only a hollow vindication. Jessica showed me to a private meeting room where I spent the next 40 minutes finalizing details for our Singapore acquisition. By the time I emerged, the reunion was in full swing. Music from our high school years blaring as former classmates relived their glory days on the dance floor. I stood at the back of the ballroom, watching the celebration unfold. Several people approached, suddenly eager to reconnect with the classmate they'd barely acknowledged before. I engaged politely, but my attention kept drifting to Lauren, who was now sitting alone at a table, scrolling through her phone with unusual intensity. Curiosity got the better of me. I made my way through the crowd, nodding to acquaintances, but not stopping until I reached her table. Mind if I join you? I asked. Lauren looked up, momentarily startled. Of course, she said, quickly putting her phone away. I sat down, noticing her nearly empty champagne glass and the slight flush on her cheeks. Enjoying the reunion? It's fine, she said, her tone clipped. Everyone seems to be having a good time. But not you, I ventured. She sighed, a crack appearing in her carefully maintained facade. It's just not how I expected tonight to go. I raised an eyebrow. Because of me? Don't flatter yourself, she replied, but there was no real bite to her words. She seemed tired suddenly, the weight of pretense taking its toll. Though I will admit, discovering my ex-husband owns the venue was surprising. Life's full of surprises, I said, echoing my earlier sentiment. Lauren's gaze met mine, and for a brief moment, I saw a glimpse of the woman I had once loved. Vulnerable, genuine, without the polished veneer she'd developed. Thomas's agency failed, she said abruptly, the words tumbling out. 6 months ago. He overextended, lost major clients, couldn't make payroll. It's been difficult. I hadn't expected this confession. Part of me, the part still smarting from past wounds, wanted to savor her discomfort. But the larger part recognized the courage it took for her to admit this. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, genuinely meaning it. She laughed, a brittle sound. "Are you? After what we said to you? After how we treated you?" "That was a long time ago," I replied, surprising myself with the realization that the anger I'd nursed for years had dulled to something less consuming. Lauren studied me for a moment, then shook her head slightly. "You've changed." "Success changes people," I said. "No," she countered. "This is something else. You seem centered." The Jack I knew was always chasing validation, desperate to prove himself. Her insight, unexpected and uncomfortably accurate, caught me off guard. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Crisis at the San Francisco property. GM requesting immediate call." I stood, apologizing for the interruption. "Duty calls." Lauren nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Of course. The price of success, right?" As I turned to leave, she called after me. "Jack," I looked back. "For what it's worth," she said, her expression sincere for the first time that evening. "I was wrong about you. We both were." I acknowledged her words with a nod, then headed out to handle the San Francisco situation. By the time I returned to the ballroom an hour later, Lauren was gone, and the reunion was winding down. Part of me was relieved. Another part felt strangely unfulfilled, as if our conversation had ended mid-sentence. The next morning, I was reviewing reports in my hotel suite when Jessica called to inform me that Lauren Parker, she still used her maiden name professionally apparently, was in the lobby asking to see me. "Send her up," I said, curiosity overriding caution. 5 minutes later, Lauren stood at my door, looking more casual than the night before in a simple blouse and trousers, her expression determined despite the nervous energy radiating from her. "Need to talk to you," she said without preamble. "About a job." "A job?" I repeated, unable to mask my surprise. This was the last thing I had expected. Lauren nodded, her usual confidence wavering slightly. "May I come in? This isn't a conversation I want to have in the hallway." I stepped aside, gesturing her into the suite. Unlike most of our properties, I kept a permanent residence at the Grand Summit, a spacious penthouse suite I used when business brought me to town. The space was minimalist but luxurious, floor-to-ceiling windows offering commanding views of the city skyline. Lauren walked in, her eyes scanning the room before settling on the panoramic vista. "Impressive," she murmured. "Have a seat," I said, motioning toward the living area. "Coffee? Please." I poured 2 cups from the carafe my assistant had delivered earlier, handing her one before taking a seat across from her. "So, a job." Lauren set her coffee down untouched, straightening her posture, a gesture I recognized from her preparations for difficult client presentations years ago. "I need to be direct," she began. "Thomas's agency collapse hit us hard, harder than I let on last night. We're essentially starting over. He's taken a mid-level position at a digital marketing firm in Boston, and She hesitated. "I'm looking for opportunities." "And you thought of me," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "You're the most successful person I know," she replied, a simple statement of fact. "And despite our history, you're also the only person who might understand my situation." I leaned back, studying her. The Lauren I knew 5 years ago would never have admitted vulnerability, much less asked for help, especially from me. This was either genuine desperation or a remarkably calculated approach. "What kind of position did you have in mind?" I asked. "Marketing director for Summit," she said without hesitation. I've researched your company thoroughly. Your marketing strategy is solid but conventional. You've built an impressive brand on exceptional service and unique properties, but your media presence lacks the cohesion and distinctive voice that could take Summit to the next level. I raised an eyebrow, caught between amusement and admiration at her audacity. So you're suggesting I need you? I'm suggesting we could benefit each other, she countered. I have 15 years of marketing experience, the last 7 at executive level. I understand luxury branding intimately, and I have extensive contacts in lifestyle media and digital marketing. And what about our history? I asked, the question that hung between us. You don't think that would complicate a professional relationship? Lauren met my gaze directly. I think we're both adults capable of separating past from present. I took a slow sip of my coffee, considering her proposal. From a purely business perspective, she wasn't wrong about our marketing approach. Summit had grown quickly, and our branding strategy hadn't evolved at the same pace. Lauren was undeniably talented. That had never been in question. But the personal complications were impossible to ignore. Why Summit? I asked finally. With your experience, you could approach any number of companies without this baggage. Lauren's professional mask slipped slightly. I've tried, she admitted. For 3 months. But the failure of Thomas's agency has followed me. In our industry, perception is everything. No one wants to hire the marketing executive whose husband's agency imploded. So I'm your last resort, I said, unsure whether to be offended or amused. You're my best option, she corrected. And maybe I'm yours too. I know I can transform Summit's market position. And yes, there's history between us, but that also means I understand you, how you think, what drives you. It was a compelling argument, wrapped in just enough flattery to appeal to my ego, while grounded in business logic I couldn't easily dismiss. The Lauren, I remembered, had always been persuasive. You'd be willing to relocate to our headquarters. In San Francisco, I asked, testing her commitment. Yes, she answered without hesitation. I'm ready for a fresh start. I stood walking to the window to gather my thoughts. Below, the city was coming to life, morning traffic filling the streets. Hiring Lauren would be complicated on multiple levels. The senior leadership team would question my judgment. HR would raise concerns about our personal history. And then there was Thomas. Having my ex-wife on payroll while her current husband struggled professionally created a dynamic ripe for problems. Yet I couldn't deny her marketing acumen, nor the surprising satisfaction I felt at the role reversal. Between us, 5 years ago she had looked at me with pity and condescension. Now she was essentially asking for my help. If, and this is a significant if, I were to consider this, I said, turning back to face her, there would need to be clear boundaries and expectations. This would be strictly professional, no special treatment, no exceptions, no leveraging our history. Lauren nodded quickly. Of course. And you'd report to our chief marketing officer, not directly to me. Understood. You'd also start with a 3-month probationary period, I continued. Standard for all executive hires, but especially important given the circumstances. Lauren's expression remained composed, but I caught the slight release of tension in her shoulders. She thought I was going to say yes. I'll need time to consider this, I said instead, and to discuss it with the executive team. Disappointment flickered across her face before she masked it. Of course. How long do you think? I'll have an answer for you by the end of the week, I interrupted, moving toward the door in a clear indication our meeting was concluding. Lauren stood, gathering her bag. Thank you for considering it, she said, her professional veneer firmly back in place. Whatever you decide, I appreciate you hearing me out. At the door, she paused. One more thing, Jack, I meant what I said last night. I was wrong about you, about your potential. I should have seen it. The admission hung in the air between us, unexpected and disarming. For a moment, I glimpsed the vulnerability beneath her polished exterior. The woman who had once shared my dreams before, deciding they weren't worth the risk. "The funny thing is," I said quietly, "I never doubted myself. Not really. I only doubted whether I'd succeed in time to prove you wrong." Lauren absorbed this, a complicated emotion crossing her face. "And now you have." "Now I have," I agreed. After she left, I called Alan Chen, my chief marketing officer, requesting an urgent meeting. 2 hours later, we sat in a private conference room as I outlined Lauren's proposal. "Let me get this straight," Alan said, his expression incredulous. "You want to hire your ex-wife, the one who left you when Summit was just a concept, as our new marketing director?" "I'm considering it," I clarified. "She has the qualifications." Alan leaned back, studying me carefully. "Jack, you've never made a business decision based solely on someone's resume. You value alignment, cultural fit, loyalty. This woman represents none of those things." "She knows our target demographic intimately," I countered. "And she has fresh perspectives on our brand positioning. So do dozens of other marketing executives who don't share complicated personal history with the CEO." Alan replied dryly. "What's really going on here?" I sighed, acknowledging the validity of his concern. 5 years ago, Lauren and her husband humiliated me at our high school reunion. They made it clear they thought I was a failure, that my ambitions were delusions. Now she's here, asking for my help. There's a certain symmetry to it. Alan's expression shifted from confusion to concern. "So this is about revenge, proving a point?" "No," I said, though perhaps with less conviction than I should have. "It's about recognizing talent, regardless of personal history." "Bullshit," Alan said bluntly. "We'd been friends since business school, long enough for him to speak freely. You want her to see up close what she walked away from. You want her to work for the empire she never believed in." His assessment was uncomfortably accurate. The thought of Lauren witnessing daily what Summit had become, what I had built without her, carried an undeniable appeal. "If I hire her," I said slowly, "it would be because she's qualified for the position, not because of our past." Alan didn't look convinced. "Whatever you tell yourself, Jack, but remember, revenge comes at a cost. Sometimes to the business, always to the person seeking it." He gathered his notes, pausing at the door. "Think about what you really want here. Is it a marketing director or vindication?" Left alone, I stared out at the cityscape, Alan's question echoing in my mind. What did I want? The businessman in me recognized Lauren's potential value to Summit. The man who had once loved her appreciated the courage it took for her to approach me. But the part of me still scarred from her rejection couldn't deny the satisfaction I'd feel seeing her working for the company she once dismissed. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Ms. Parker has requested your contact information for follow-up. Shall I provide it?" I typed back, "Yes, and Jessica, please arrange a full company tour for Ms. Parker tomorrow morning. I'll join for the executive floor presentations." Tomorrow I would show Lauren exactly what she had walked away from. Then I would decide whether to offer her the chance to be part of it. The next morning I arrived at the Grand Summit's executive offices earlier than usual. The top floor of the hotel had been transformed into Summit Hospitality Group's regional headquarters, a sleek, modern workspace with glass-walled conference rooms and an open floor plan that encouraged collaboration while still offering privacy. When needed, I found myself straightening items on my desk, adjusting the placement of industry awards on the shelves, behaviors that betrayed an uncharacteristic nervousness. This wasn't a high-stakes investor meeting or a difficult negotiation with a property owner, scenarios I handled routinely without a second thought. This was Lauren, seeing the full extent of what I'd built, and somehow that felt more consequential. Precisely 9 o'clock, Jessica appeared at my door. "Ms. Parker has arrived, Mr. Reeves." "Thank you." Have Kevin start the tour with the hotel facilities. I'll join them for the executive-level presentations at 10. After Jessica left, I pulled up Lauren's resume on my tablet, reviewing it one more time. Her career trajectory had been impressive until Thomas's agency collapse. Senior marketing manager at Anderson Marketing by 27, marketing director. By 30, chief marketing officer at Miller Creative Partners by 32. Then, nothing for the past 6 months. I set the tablet aside, wondering if I was making a mistake. Alan's warning echoed in my mind. Revenge comes at a cost. But this wasn't about revenge, I told myself. This was about business. If Lauren could deliver even half of what she promised for Summit's brand strategy, her history with me would be irrelevant. At 10 o'clock, I made my way to the main conference room where Kevin, our director of operations, was concluding his presentation on our property portfolio. And with the Singapore acquisition finalizing next month, Summit will have established footholds in all our target markets across Southeast Asia, Kevin was saying as I entered. Mr. Reeves can tell you more about our international expansion strategy. Lauren turned at my entrance, her expression professionally composed, but her eyes alert, taking in every detail. She wore a tailored navy suit that spoke of quality without ostentation, appropriate for someone who understood the distinction between luxury and excess. Ms. Parker, I nodded, slipping effortlessly into the role of CEO rather than ex-husband. How are you finding the tour so far? Impressive, she replied with genuine appreciation. Kevin was just showing me the architectural renderings for the Singapore property. The rooftop infinity pool concept is stunning. I smiled slightly, remembering the night I'd sketched that concept on a hotel notepad during a red-eye flight to Tokyo. It was inspired by a similar feature at our Kyoto location, though we've adapted it to incorporate Singapore's skyline more dramatically. For the next hour, I led Lauren through detailed presentations of Summit's growth strategy, brand philosophy, and future projections. She asked insightful questions, took careful notes, and demonstrated the sharp marketing mind I remembered. The same mind that had once dismissed my hotel ambitions as unattainable. As we walked from the conference room toward the executive offices, I noticed how staff members glanced curiously at Lauren, no doubt wondering who the unknown woman receiving the CEO's personal attention might be. Your team seems exceptionally committed, Lauren observed, as we passed a group of designers engaged in an animated discussion about a property rebranding. They are, I agreed. Many have been with me since the early days. When you're building something from nothing, loyalty matters. The subtle emphasis on loyalty wasn't lost on Lauren. A flash of discomfort crossed her face before she masked it with a professional smile. We reached the executive wing, where the offices of Summit's leadership team lined a corridor leading to my corner office. Glass walls offered views of the city on one side and the creative workspace on the other, a deliberate design choice to maintain transparency between leadership and staff. This is where our executive team works, I explained. Chief Financial Officer, Chief Operations Officer, Chief Technology Officer, and I paused as we reached a particularly well-appointed office, our Chief Marketing Officer, Alan Chen. Through the glass, we could see Alan on a video call, gesturing emphatically as he spoke. His office walls displayed framed marketing campaigns from various Summit properties, each distinct yet cohesively branded. He seems passionate, Lauren observed. He is, I confirmed. Alan's been with me since the beginning. He understood my vision when most people thought it was unrealistic. Lauren absorbed this, her gaze lingering on the award-winning campaign. Materials displayed throughout the marketing department. You've built something remarkable, Jack, she said quietly. Something most people couldn't even envision, let alone execute. The admission was sincere, lacking the calculated quality of her earlier compliments. For a moment, I glimpsed the woman I had once known, the one who could appreciate ambition before practicality overshadowed her perspective. "Let me show you my office," I said, leading her to the end of the corridor. My workspace was larger than the others, but similarly designed: glass walls, modern furniture, and panoramic views. The only personal touches were a small collection of architectural models of our flagship properties and a single framed photograph on my desk, angled away from visitors' view. Lauren moved toward the window, taking in the commanding vista. "It's a long way from our apartment kitchen table," she said, referencing where I'd drafted my initial business plans years ago. "A very long way," I agreed, watching her reflection in the glass. She turned, her eyes falling on the framed photo on my desk. Before I could react, she picked it up, studying the image, me standing proudly in front of my first hotel on opening day, arm around Eliza Martinez, my former mentor and the angel investor who had believed in Summit when no one else would. "Is this your first property?" Lauren asked, her voice carefully neutral. "Yes. The harbor view in Seattle," I confirmed. "Eliza took a chance on me when traditional investors wouldn't touch my proposal." Lauren set the photo down gently. "She saw what I didn't," she said, a quiet acknowledgement that caught me off guard. I didn't respond immediately, unsure how to navigate this unexpected moment of vulnerability. 5 years ago, I would have leapt at the opening, eager for reconciliation or closure. Now, success had granted me a perspective I'd lacked then. "The past is past, Lauren," I said finally. "We both made choices based on what we knew and what we valued at the time." She met my gaze directly. "My choice was wrong. I prioritized security over potential. I chose the seemingly safe path and missed being part of this." She gestured to encompass not just the office, but everything it represented. The confession hung in the air between us. Neither accusation nor plea, simply truth. 5 years ago, it would have meant everything to hear these words. Now, they were just another data point in a complicated history. "We should finish the tour," I said, moving toward the door. "The marketing department is next." As we walked through the creative hub of Summit's operation, Lauren's professional demeanor returned. She engaged with the team members I introduced, asked intelligent questions about ongoing campaigns, and offered observations that demonstrated her expertise without overstepping. By the end of the tour, we stood in the hotel's grand lobby, the bustle of guests and staff, a reminder of the practical foundation beneath Summit's corporate success. "Thank you for today," Lauren said, extending her hand formally. "Regardless of your decision about the position, I appreciate seeing what you've built." I shook her hand, noting the professional distance she had re-established. "I'll have an answer for you by Friday," I promised. As she turned to leave, I added, "There's a dinner tomorrow night at the Westlake Club. Summit's executive team and major investors. If you're available, it might be worthwhile for you to attend." Lauren looked back, surprise momentarily breaking through her composure. "Are you offering me the job?" "I'm offering you an opportunity to meet the team in a less formal setting," I clarified. "Consider it part of the interview process." She nodded, understanding the implications. "I'll be there." After she left, I returned to my office, contemplating the day's events. Lauren had been genuinely impressed by Summit, that much was clear. What was less clear were my own motivations for potentially bringing her into the company. Was it purely business? Or was there still some part of me seeking validation, wanting her to witness daily what she had dismissed as impossible? My phone buzzed with a text from Alan. "So, how did the tour go? Still thinking about hiring the ex?" I typed back, "She's coming to the Westlake dinner tomorrow. I want the team's assessment." Alan's response was immediate. "Bold move. Sure this isn't personal?" I didn't reply because I honestly wasn't sure anymore. What had started as a simple, if complicated, business decision had evolved into something more nuanced, over the past 24 hours. Lauren had acknowledged her mistake in underestimating me, something I'd once desperately wanted to hear. But now that I had, the satisfaction was less potent than I'd imagined. I turned to the window, watching the city below as afternoon shadows lengthened across the streets. Tomorrow's dinner would be the final test. If Lauren could integrate with the executive team, demonstrate her value without leaning on our history, perhaps there was a place for her at Summit. And if not, well, at least she had seen exactly what she had walked away from all those years ago. That would have to be enough. The Westlake Club occupied the top 2 floors of a historic building downtown, its membership restricted to the city's business elite. I'd been invited to join 3 years ago, after Summit's valuation crossed the $500 million mark. Back then, the invitation had felt like vindication, concrete proof that I had finally arrived in the circles that Thomas and Lauren had once inhabited. Without me. Now, as I adjusted my tie in the private elevator, I found myself strangely anxious about Lauren meeting my executive team in this setting. The dinner wasn't just about assessing her potential fit at Summit. It was about seeing her interact within my world. A world that once would have seemed impossibly distant to both of us. The elevator doors opened to the club's main dining room, where floor-to-ceiling windows offered spectacular sunset views of the city skyline. Most of my team had already arrived, gathered near the bar with drinks in hand. Alan spotted me first, excusing himself from a conversation to approach. "She's not here yet," he said without preamble, handing me a whiskey. "Sure you want to go through with this?" I accepted the drink with a nod. "It's just dinner, Alan. With your executive team and your ex-wife." He raised an eyebrow. "Nothing complicated about that." Before I could respond, the elevator doors opened again, and Lauren stepped out. She wore a deep emerald dress that managed to be both appropriate for a business dinner and striking enough to command attention. Her hair was swept up elegantly, diamond studs catching the light as she scanned the room. When she spotted me, her lips curved into a small, professional smile. I moved to greet her, aware of the curious glances from my team. Few of them knew my full history with Lauren. Most assumed she was simply a potential executive hire I was courting. "Lauren, welcome," I said, keeping my tone warm but professional. "Let me introduce you to everyone." I guided her through the room, making introductions to each member of my leadership team. Lauren was at her most charming, asking thoughtful questions that demonstrated she'd researched not just Summit, but the backgrounds of its key executives. By the time we sat down for dinner, she had already established rapport with most of the table. "Ms. Parker," began Diana Ross, our chief financial officer, as the first course was served, "Jack tells us you have an interesting perspective on Summit's current marketing strategy." Lauren glanced at me briefly before answering. "I believe Summit has built an extraordinary product with a good brand, but the current approach doesn't fully leverage what makes the properties truly unique, the narrative behind each location." Alan leaned forward slightly. "We've consistently won industry awards for our campaigns. You think there's something we're missing?" It was a deliberate challenge, and I watched carefully to see how Lauren would handle it. 5 years ago, she might have become defensive or dismissive. The Lauren I remembered didn't respond well to having her expertise questioned. But the woman across the table surprised me. "The awards are well-deserved," she acknowledged with a genuine nod to Alan. "The visual identity is impeccable, and your digital strategy is ahead of most competitors. What I'm suggesting isn't a replacement, but an enhancement, connecting each property to a larger narrative that makes guests feel they're experiencing something singular rather than simply staying at an excellent hotel." Alan didn't look entirely convinced, but Diana nodded thoughtfully. "Like how the Four Seasons has distinct properties but a unified sense of heritage." "Exactly," Lauren agreed. "Except Summit has something more compelling, a founder's journey that embodies determination and vision. That story could become part of the brand's DNA without being overtly mentioned. I nearly choked on my wine. She was suggesting using my personal story, our story in many ways, as a marketing narrative. The irony wasn't lost on me, nor was the calculated brilliance of the approach. Summit's origin story was compelling, especially to the self-made entrepreneurs who comprised much of our clientele. An interesting concept, I said neutrally, watching Lauren across the table, though perhaps one that blurs the line between personal and professional. Her eyes met mine, holding my gaze steadily. The most powerful brands often do, she replied. They tap into something authentic that resonates beyond features and amenities. The conversation shifted to other topics, our upcoming Asian expansion, the challenges of maintaining consistent service standards across culturally diverse markets, the potential impact of emerging travel trends. Throughout the dinner, Lauren demonstrated both expertise and adaptability, contributing insights without dominating the discussion. By dessert, I could tell most of my team was impressed. Even Alan, initially skeptical, had engaged Lauren in a spirited discussion about digital marketing metrics that revealed her genuine grasp of the technical aspects of the field. As coffee was served, Marcus Wong, our Chief Technology Officer, turned to Lauren with a direct question. Why Summit? With your background, you could approach any number of hospitality groups. What draws you specifically to our company? The table quieted, all eyes turning to Lauren. It was the question I'd asked her myself, but now, in this setting, her answer would carry different weight. Lauren set down her coffee cup deliberately, taking a moment to gather her thoughts. The honest answer has several layers, she began. Professionally, I'm drawn to Summit because it's redefining luxury hospitality in ways other companies are only beginning to understand. The integration of technology and personalized service, the architectural vision behind each property, it's revolutionary rather than iterative. She paused, and I could see her weighing how much personal history to reveal. There's also a more personal reason, she continued carefully. Years ago, I underestimated what Summit could become. I failed to see the potential that was clearly there from the beginning. The opportunity to be part of it now, to contribute to something I once missed, is meaningful to me. The admission was subtle enough that only those who knew our history would understand its full significance. Alan glanced at me, his expression unreadable. Diana and Marcus exchanged quick looks, picking up on the undercurrent without necessarily knowing the details. Well, Marcus said after a moment, that's refreshingly honest. The dinner concluded around 10, with executives gradually departing in small groups. Lauren networked efficiently, exchanging contact information with several team members and making plans to continue discussions about specific marketing initiatives. I observed from a distance, impressed despite myself by her ability to connect with my team while maintaining appropriate professional boundaries. Eventually, only Lauren, Alan and I remained. Alan excused himself after a pointed look in my direction that clearly said, "Be careful." As the elevator doors closed behind him, Lauren turned to me. "Your team is exceptional," she said. "They're genuinely invested in Summit's success, not just their individual roles." "I hire people who see the bigger picture," I replied, moving toward the window. The city sprawled below us, lights twinkling in the darkness. People who believe in building something lasting. Lauren joined me at the window, maintaining a respectful distance. "Have you made a decision?" she asked directly. "About the position?" I studied her reflection in the glass. "You impressed them tonight, even Alan, which isn't easy." "But," she prompted, sensing my hesitation. I turned to face her fully. "But I'm still not convinced this is the right move. For Summit or for you?" "Because of our history," she stated rather than asked. "Partly," I acknowledged. "And partly because I'm not certain of your motivations. Lauren frowned slightly. I've been transparent about my situation. You've been transparent about your professional circumstances, I interrupted. But this isn't just about a job for you, is it? There's something else you're looking for here. She held my gaze for a long moment before her shoulders dropped slightly, her professional armor falling away. Redemption, perhaps, she admitted quietly. A chance to be part of what I should have believed in from the start. Her honesty caught me off guard. I had expected deflection, perhaps even indignation at the suggestion of ulterior motives. Instead, she had acknowledged the emotional undercurrent that had been present since our encounter at the reunion. "And if I offer you the position," I asked, "what happens when you find that redemption, or if you don't?" "I don't know," she answered, the simple truth of it hanging between us. "But I do know I would give everything to this role, to earning my place in the company I once dismissed. The rest—" She shook her head slightly. "The rest would have to sort itself out over time." We stood in silence for a moment, the weight of our shared history and uncertain future filling the space between us. Finally, I reached a decision. "Be at the main office Monday morning, 8 o'clock, I said. 3-month probationary period. Reporting to Alan. If it works out, we'll discuss a permanent position." Lauren's eyes widened slightly, hope and disbelief mingling in her expression. "You're offering me the job?" "I'm offering you an opportunity," I clarified. "What you make of it is up to you." A smile spread across her face, genuine, without the polished edge of her professional persona. For a brief moment I glimpsed the woman I had once built dreams with, before reality and different priorities had pulled us apart. "Thank you, Jack," she said softly. "I won't let you down. Not again." As we rode the elevator down in companionable silence, I wondered if I was making a brilliant business decision or the biggest mistake of my professional life. Monday would begin to provide the answer. One thing was certain. Lauren Parker was about to become part of Summit Hospitality Group, the very empire she once believed would never exist. Lauren's first day at Summit began with the standard new employee orientation, HR paperwork, system access setup, company policy reviews, but nothing about the situation was standard. By mid-morning, rumors had already spread throughout the executive floor. The new marketing director was the CEO's ex-wife. I deliberately stayed away, focusing on conference calls and meetings that kept me out of the office most of the day. This was Alan's domain now. Lauren would report to him directly. My involvement would only complicate an already complex situation. When I returned late afternoon, Jessica handed me a stack of messages and a knowing look. "Ms. Parker has settled into her office," she informed me. "Mr. Chen has been giving her the departmental orientation personally." "Good," I replied neutrally, though I caught myself glancing down the hall toward the marketing department. "She requested a meeting with you tomorrow morning," Jessica continued. "I've scheduled her for 9:30. Was that appropriate?" "That's fine," I said, retreating into my office before Jessica could observe any reaction. I spent the evening reviewing quarterly reports, deliberately pushing thoughts of Lauren to the periphery. This was business now, nothing more. The fact that my ex-wife was working down the hall in the company she once dismissed as a pipe dream was simply an ironic footnote in Summit's corporate history. The next morning, Lauren arrived precisely on time for our meeting, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, a leather portfolio tucked under her arm. The professional transformation was complete. She looked every inch the executive, any trace of personal connection carefully concealed beneath layers of corporate formality. "Thank you for seeing me," she began, taking the seat across from me. "I wanted to discuss a few initial observations and establish some parameters for our working relationship." "Of course," I replied, matching her professional tone. "How was your first day?" "Productive." Alan gave me a comprehensive overview of current campaigns and immediate priorities. She opened her portfolio, retrieving a slim document. "I've drafted Some thoughts on reporting structures and communication protocols, given our unique situation. I accepted the document, scanning its contents quickly. Lauren had outlined clear boundaries. All work-related communications would go through Alan. We would maintain strictly professional interactions in the office. Any matters relating to our past would be discussed privately, outside of work hours, if necessary at all. It was thorough, pragmatic, and exactly what the situation required. I felt a grudging admiration for her foresight. This was the Lauren I remembered, always 3 steps ahead in managing complex dynamics. "This looks appropriate," I said, setting the document aside. "Have you reviewed our marketing calendar for the quarter?" "Yes, the Kyoto campaign launch is the immediate priority, followed by positioning for the Singapore opening." She hesitated slightly before continuing. "I've already mentioned to Alan that I think we can strengthen the narrative connections between properties while maintaining their individual identities. The founder's journey concept you mentioned at dinner," I observed. She nodded. "Not explicitly using your personal story, but drawing on its themes: vision, persistence, transformation. These elements could create an emotional through-line across all Summit properties." The idea was brilliant from a marketing perspective, using Summit's origin as subtle brand mythology without directly referencing me. It was also surreal to discuss with Lauren, who had been present for the earliest chapters of that story before choosing to exit the narrative. "Develop a formal proposal," I said finally. "If Alan approves the concept, we can present it to the executive team next month." "Thank you," she replied, making a note in her portfolio. "One more thing. I'd like your permission to conduct in-depth interviews with long-term team members. Understanding the company culture from those who helped build it would be valuable for my integration and for future marketing strategies." I nodded my agreement, and with that, our first official meeting as CEO and marketing director concluded. Lauren gathered her materials, maintaining the careful professional distance she had established from the moment she entered. At the door, she paused. "This is strange for both of us," she acknowledged, the first crack in her corporate veneer. "But I'm grateful for the opportunity, Jack, truly." After she left, I sat contemplating our interaction. Everything about it had been textbook professional. Appropriate, efficient, focused on business objectives, yet underneath ran currents of our shared history, unspoken but present in every carefully chosen word and maintained boundary. The weeks that followed established a pattern. Lauren immersed herself in Summit's marketing operations, working closely with Alan and quickly earning the respect of her team through a combination of expertise and genuine collaborative approach. She stayed late, arrived early, and produced work that even Alan, still skeptical of her motivations, had to acknowledge was exceptional. We maintained professional distance, interacting primarily in group settings or scheduled meetings. Occasionally, I would spot her in the company cafe or pass her in the corridor, and we would exchange polite greetings before continuing on our separate ways. To casual observers, we were simply CEO and marketing director, any personal history, invisible beneath layers of professional decorum. 3 weeks into Lauren's tenure, Alan stopped by my office after hours, closing the door behind him. "She's good," he admitted without preamble. "Better than good. Her analysis of our digital engagement metrics identified patterns we've been missing for years." I looked up from my computer. "But," Alan sighed, dropping into the chair across from me. "But I still don't trust this situation. She's integrating too smoothly, Jack. It's like she was made for this role." "Isn't that what we want in an executive hire?" I countered, though I understood his concern. "You know what I mean," he said, leaning forward. "This is the woman who left when Summit was just an idea on paper. Now she's crafting campaigns that celebrate the company's journey. There's something off about it." I considered his words carefully. Lauren's performance had been exemplary, beyond what even I had expected. Her founder's journey concept had evolved into a sophisticated brand narrative that resonated deeply with our target clientele without ever directly mentioning me. Initial testing showed exceptional engagement metrics. Have you asked her directly, I questioned, about her motivations? Alan nodded grimly. Yesterday, over drinks after the creative review. And, she said, he paused, seemingly considering how to phrase it. She said that helping build Summit now is her way of making amends for not believing in it then. That she's not looking for personal redemption as much as professional contribution to something significant. The answer resonated with what Lauren had told me, yet I understood Alan's skepticism. It seemed too neat, too convenient. Keep an eye on her work, I said finally. Judge her by her results. Alan studied me for a moment. And what about you, Jack? Are you judging her just by her work? The question hung in the air between us, one I had been deliberately avoiding in my own reflections. Having Lauren at Summit satisfied something I hadn't fully acknowledged, not simply vindication, but a closing of a circle that had remained painfully open since our divorce. I'm trying to, I answered honestly. After Alan left, I found myself drawn to the window, gazing out at the city lights flickering to life as dusk settled. 4 floors below in the marketing department, I could see Lauren still at her desk, surrounded by campaign materials, absorbed in her work. The following Monday, a minor crisis erupted with our Maldives property. A scheduling error had double-booked a high-profile client and a major social media influencer for the same exclusive villa. Both were due to arrive in less than 48 hours, and neither was willing to accept alternative accommodations. I called an emergency meeting with the executive team to address the situation. Lauren arrived last, having been pulled from a creative review. Options? I asked the room. Various solutions were proposed, upgrading one party to our partner property nearby, offering helicopter service to our Seychelles location, creative compensation packages, but none adequately addressed the core problem. Both clients had specifically booked the Summit Maldives for its unique overwater villa design and exclusive location. What if we don't try to relocate either of them? Lauren interjected suddenly. All eyes turned to her. The influencer is booked for a content creation stay, essentially a working vacation showcasing our property, she continued. The executive is seeking privacy and luxury during a milestone anniversary celebration. She leaned forward, warming to her idea. Instead of seeing this as a conflict, what if we position it as a collaborative opportunity? The influencer creates an exclusive anniversary content series, documenting the celebration without intruding on the couple's privacy. The executive and his wife receive professionally produced anniversary memories as a special amenity. We position it as a curated Summit experience rather than a booking error. The room fell silent as we considered the proposal. It was elegant, transforming a potential PR disaster into a unique offering that aligned perfectly with Summit's brand promise of exceptional, personalized experiences. It's unorthodox, Diana commented finally. So is Summit, Lauren countered. That's the entire brand identity, redefining luxury through unexpected excellence. She had quoted directly from my first business plan, words I'd written at our kitchen table years ago when Summit was nothing more than an ambitious concept. Words I wasn't certain she had ever truly read or remembered. Her eyes met mine across the conference table, and I realized she hadn't simply been researching Summit's corporate history. She had been reconnecting with the vision she had once dismissed. Make the calls, I decided. Position it exactly as Lauren suggested. If either party refuses, we'll regroup. But this is our first approach. The team dispersed to implement the plan, but I asked Lauren to stay behind. When we were alone, I turned to her with the question that had been building since the meeting began. You quoted my original business plan, I said. How did you remember that exact phrasing? Lauren's professional mask slipped slightly, revealing a glimpse of vulnerability. Beneath. I kept a copy, she admitted quietly, after I left. I've read it many times over the years, especially after seeing what Summit became. The confession caught me off guard. I had assumed she had discarded everything from our relationship, including the dreams she hadn't believed were possible. Why? I asked simply. She looked away, gathering her thoughts before meeting my gaze again. To remind myself of what happens when you evaluate potential through the lens of fear instead of possibility. She paused, then added softly, and perhaps to stay connected to the person I once loved, even after I'd convinced myself he couldn't succeed. The honesty of her answer disarmed me completely. This wasn't the calculated response of someone seeking professional advantage or even personal redemption. This was Lauren, the real Lauren beneath the polished executive exterior, acknowledging a truth that was both professional and deeply personal. Before I could respond, her phone buzzed with a message from Alan. The moment passed as quickly as it had arrived, both of us retreating behind our professional boundaries once more. I should get back to the team, she said, rising from her chair. We have calls to make. I nodded, watching as she slipped back into her role as marketing director, the brief window into her personal thoughts closing as she walked out the door. That night, I sat in my penthouse reviewing the events of the day. Lauren's crisis management approach had worked perfectly. Both clients had enthusiastically embraced the collaborative concept, transforming a potential disaster into what would likely become a signature Summit experience. More troubling was the revelation that she had kept my business plan all these years, reading it repeatedly as Summit grew into what she had once considered impossible. What did that mean for her motivations now? For my own? The lines between professional and personal were blurring in ways I hadn't anticipated when I offered her the position. The question was whether we could navigate that complexity while maintaining the boundaries necessary for Summit's continued success. 6 weeks into Lauren's tenure at Summit, her probationary evaluation was approaching. The marketing department had been transformed under her leadership. Campaigns were more cohesive, engagement metrics had improved across all platforms, and her team had developed a renewed sense of creative energy that was palpable throughout the office. Even Alan had gradually shifted from skepticism to grudging respect, especially after Lauren's crisis management solution had not only resolved the Maldives booking issue, but resulted in content that was generating unprecedented social media traction for the property. The real test, however, would be the Singapore launch. Summit's newest property represented our largest investment to date and our strategic entry into the Southeast Asian luxury market. The grand opening was scheduled for the end of the month, with industry leaders, investors, and elite media all confirmed to attend. Lauren had been working tirelessly on the launch strategy, often staying in the office until midnight. Her founder's journey concept had evolved into a sophisticated narrative that subtly infused every aspect of the marketing materials without ever explicitly mentioning me or our past. It was brilliant work, professional in every sense, yet unmistakably influenced by our shared history. We maintained our carefully established boundaries, interacting primarily in team settings and scheduled meetings. To the outside observer, we were simply CEO and marketing director, any personal connection hidden beneath layers of corporate decorum. Then came the Shanghai crisis. I was in Tokyo, finalizing details for a potential new property, when Jessica called with the news. Thomas Miller, Lauren's husband, had been spotted meeting with representatives from the Luxe Collection, our primary competitor in the Asian market. According to our sources, he was discussing marketing strategies for their upcoming Shanghai property, which was directly positioned against our own development in the same city. Has Lauren been informed? I asked, pacing my hotel suite as I absorbed the implications. "Not yet," Jessica replied. "Mr. Chen thought you should be briefed first, given the personal complications." I exhaled slowly. Thomas working with our competitors created not just a potential conflict of interest, but a significant PR vulnerability. If the business press caught wind of it, the narrative practically wrote itself. Ex-wife works for billionaire while husband. Consults for competitor. "I'll handle it," I decided. "Book me on the next flight back." 14 hours later, I arrived at Summit's headquarters, going directly to my office where Alan was waiting with a more detailed report. "It's confirmed," he said grimly. "Miller's been contracted as a marketing consultant for the Luxe Collection's Asian expansion. Focus on their Shanghai property, which is directly targeting our market segment. Could be coincidence," I suggested, though neither of us believed it. Alan snorted. "Pretty convenient coincidence. He signs on with them right when we're finalizing our Shanghai property details, information his wife would have access to. The implication hung heavily in the air." "Lauren hasn't shown any sign of divided loyalties," I pointed out. "Her work has been exemplary." "Maybe that's part of the play," Alan countered. "Build trust, gain access, then feed information to the husband working for the competition." I shook my head, surprised by my own instinctive defense of Lauren. "That's not her style. People change, Jack," Alan said quietly, "especially when they're desperate." The comment struck uncomfortably close to home. Lauren had approached Summit when she was professionally vulnerable, after Thomas's agency had failed, when they were rebuilding financially. Had that desperation driven her to more complicated motives than she'd admitted? "Where is she now?" I asked. "Finalizing details for the Singapore launch. She doesn't know about Thomas yet." I nodded, making my decision. "I'll speak with her privately. Keep this contained for now. Executive team only." Alan looked like he wanted to object, but simply nodded. "Your call." "But Jack," he added as he reached the door, "be careful. You have more than a company to protect here." After he left, I sat contemplating how to approach the conversation. Lauren had been nothing but professional since joining Summit. Her work was exceptional, her commitment to the company seemingly genuine. Yet Thomas, working for our direct competitor, created complications that couldn't be ignored. I had Jessica schedule a private meeting with Lauren for that evening after regular office hours. Better to handle this discreetly, away from curious eyes and ears. She arrived precisely on time, professional as always in a tailored navy suit, her expression shifting from neutral to concerned as she registered my serious demeanor. "You're back early from Tokyo," she observed, taking the seat across from me. "Is everything all right?" I studied her for a moment, searching for any sign of duplicity or knowledge of what was coming. I saw only professional curiosity tinged with genuine concern. "We need to discuss a sensitive matter," I began carefully. "Regarding Thomas." Lauren's expression immediately tightened, wariness replacing concern. "What about him?" "He's been contracted by the Luxe Collection as a marketing consultant for their Shanghai property." The statement hung in the air between us. Lauren's face paled slightly, her fingers tensing against the armrest of her chair, but her expression revealed genuine shock rather than guilty knowledge. "That's not possible," she said finally. "Thomas accepted a position with Meridian Digital in Boston 2 months ago. He's been working remotely while preparing to relocate. Now it was my turn to be surprised." "You're certain?" "Of course I'm certain," she replied, an edge entering her voice. "We may be separated, but I know where my husband works." The word separated hit me like a physical blow. Lauren must have seen the reaction cross my face because she immediately straightened, professional mask slipping back into place. "Thomas and I have been separated for 4 months, she explained more formally. "It's not public knowledge, and I didn't mention it during my hiring process because I didn't want it to seem like I was using personal circumstances for sympathy. I processed this new information, recalibrating everything I thought I understood about her situation. But at the reunion, we were still trying to make it work then, she interrupted. The agency failure put enormous strain on our marriage. When I approached you about the position at Summit, we were already living apart. The revelation changed the context of everything. Her eagerness for a fresh start, her willingness to relocate to San Francisco, her dedication to Summit that went beyond professional ambition. I apologize for the personal questions, I said. But given the potential conflict of interest, I need to understand the situation fully. Are you in contact with Thomas? Lauren's professional composure faltered slightly. Minimal contact, primarily through lawyers. Our divorce should be finalized next month. She paused, then added with quiet emphasis, I have shared no information about Summit with him or anyone else. My loyalty is to this company. I believed her, perhaps against better judgment, perhaps because I wanted to, but the fact remained that Thomas was working with our competitor. Regardless of your personal situation, this creates a potential PR vulnerability for Summit, I explained. If the business press discovers the connection, I understand, she cut in, back to the consummate professional. What do you need from me? Her directness, her immediate focus on solutions rather than defensiveness, reminded me of why she had been such an effective partner once, before ambition and security had pulled us in different directions. Transparency, I answered. Complete disclosure of any contact with Thomas, past or future. Documentation of exactly what information you've had access to regarding our Shanghai development. And, unfortunately, temporary exclusion from certain aspects of the project until we can evaluate the full implications. Lauren absorbed these requirements without protest, nodding her understanding. Of course. I'll prepare a complete disclosure document tonight. She rose to leave, but paused at the door, turning back with an expression that combined professional determination with something more personal, perhaps regret, perhaps simply exhaustion. Jack, I understand why you have to take these precautions. But I need you to know that I would never compromise Summit, not just because it's my job now, but because... She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. Because I finally understand what you were building all along. And because I'm trying to build something for myself too, a second chance I didn't think I'd get. After she left, I sat contemplating the unexpected turn of events. Lauren separated from Thomas, divorce proceedings underway. The timing aligned with her approaching me about the job, yet she hadn't used it to strengthen her case or elicit sympathy. More importantly, the revelation created a new context for her dedication to Summit. Was she simply seeking professional redemption, as she'd claimed? Or was there something more personal in her commitment to the company, and perhaps to me? I pushed the thought aside. Whatever her motivations, Thomas's involvement with our competitor created a tangible business risk that needed addressing. The next morning, Lauren delivered a comprehensive disclosure document detailing every piece of information she'd had access to regarding our Shanghai development, along with a signed affidavit confirming she had shared nothing with Thomas or any third party. The thoroughness of the report only reinforced my growing conviction that she had been blindsided by Thomas's actions. 2 days later, our legal team confirmed what Lauren had stated. Thomas Miller had indeed been working remotely for Meridian Digital in Boston. His contract with the Luxe collection had been signed only a week ago, well after he and Lauren had separated. It could be coincidence, Diana suggested during our executive briefing, or it could be his way of striking back. At both of you, Lauren for leaving and you for hiring her. The assessment made uncomfortable sense. If Thomas felt betrayed by Lauren joining Summit, working for our competitor would be a calculated retaliation, professional revenge mirroring personal grievances. As the Singapore launch approached, Lauren's role was partially restricted on the Shanghai project, though she continued to lead the broader marketing strategy with characteristic professionalism. If she resented the limitations, she never showed it, maintaining the same focused dedication that had impressed even her initial skeptics. The question that remained unanswered, that I carefully avoided examining too closely, was what Lauren's impending divorce meant for our carefully maintained professional boundaries, and whether those boundaries had been the only thing preventing a more complex reckoning with our shared past. The week before the Singapore launch was a blur of final preparations, press briefings, and logistical coordination. Summit's entire executive team relocated temporarily to our Singapore offices to oversee the culmination of years of planning and investment. Despite the restrictions on her involvement with the Shanghai project, Lauren had exceeded expectations with the Singapore launch strategy. Her founder's journey concept had been subtly woven throughout the property's design, marketing materials, and guest experience, creating a narrative of transformation and vision that resonated with our target clientele without ever explicitly mentioning my personal story. We maintained our professional distance amid the frenetic pace, interacting primarily in team meetings and structured settings. If the executive team had questions about Lauren's separation from Thomas, they kept them private, focusing instead on the immediate challenge of ensuring a flawless property launch. The night before the official opening, Summit hosted an exclusive preview event for select media, industry leaders, and high-net-worth investors. The property was stunning, a masterpiece of modern architecture seamlessly integrated with traditional Singaporean elements, perched dramatically on the waterfront with panoramic views of the city skyline. I stood at the edge of the rooftop infinity pool, watching as Singapore's elite mingled among carefully curated experiences that showcase the property's unique features. The evening was unfolding perfectly, the culmination of vision, persistence, and meticulous attention to detail that had defined Summit's ascent in the luxury hospitality market. "Congratulations!" came a familiar voice behind me. "It's magnificent," I turned to find Lauren, elegant in a floor-length emerald gown, holding 2 glasses of champagne. She offered one to me, maintaining a professional distance despite the intimacy of the gesture. "Thank you," I replied, accepting the champagne. "Your team's work on the launch has been exceptional." She smiled, the professional mask softening slightly in the warm evening air. "The property speaks for itself. We just created the framework to showcase it." We stood side by side overlooking the glittering city below, a moment of shared achievement that transcended our complicated history. For a brief instant, I was reminded of similar moments years ago when we would celebrate small victories together before success and failure had driven us apart. "I received the final divorce papers yesterday," Lauren said quietly, her gaze fixed on the skyline. "They'll be processed next week." I glanced at her, uncertain how to respond to this personal revelation in our professional setting. "I'm sorry," I offered finally. She shook her head slightly. "Don't be. It's been over for a long time. We just didn't want to admit it." She turned to face me directly. "Thomas took the Lux Collection job deliberately, you know. When he found out I was working for you, I suspected as much," I admitted. "He called it poetic justice, me working for the man whose dreams I dismissed, him working for your competitor." She smiled ruefully. He always did have a flair for drama. Before I could respond, Diana approached with an important investor in tow, and the moment dissolved into professional introductions and strategic conversation. Lauren smoothly transitioned back into her role as marketing director, the personal disclosure momentarily set aside. Throughout the evening, I found my attention repeatedly drawn to her as she navigated the event with practiced ease, engaging with media, guiding VIP guests through the property's features, embodying the sophisticated brand identity she had helped refine for Summit. There was something different about her now compared to when she had first approached me about the job. A confidence that came not from external validation, but from genuine accomplishment. In just 2 months, she had proven herself invaluable to Summit, earning respect through results rather than past connection. The preview event concluded successfully around midnight with glowing early reactions from influential guests and commitments from several potential investors for future Summit projects. As the executive team gathered for a brief debriefing, Alan raised his glass in a toast. "To a successful launch," he said, "and to the team that made it happen, especially our newest member, who has exceeded all expectations." He nodded toward Lauren with genuine respect. The founder's journey concept has resonated deeply with our target demographic. Early press coverage is calling it innovative storytelling in the luxury space. Lauren accepted the acknowledgement graciously, but I noticed her gaze flicker briefly to me. A silent recognition that the journey being celebrated was, in part, our story, though recontextualized and depersonalized for Summit's brand narrative. After the team dispersed, I found myself alone on the rooftop terrace, contemplating the next day's official opening. Lauren's divorce revelation lingered in my thoughts, along with the unmistakable shift in our dynamic over the past weeks. The professional boundaries we had established were functioning effectively, but beneath them ran currents of shared history and evolving understanding that couldn't be neatly contained within corporate protocols. "Still working?" Lauren asked, emerging onto the terrace. She had changed from her formal gown into a simple black dress, more casual, but no less elegant. "Just thinking," I replied, turning to face her. "Tomorrow completes Summit's Asian expansion strategy. It's been a long road." She nodded, moving to stand beside me at the railing. "You've built something remarkable, Jack. Something most people couldn't even imagine, let alone achieve." "Including you," I said, the words escaping before I could consider their impact. Lauren didn't flinch from the observation. "Especially me," she agreed quietly. "I lacked vision when it mattered most." The honesty in her admission disarmed me, as it had increasingly over the weeks of working together. This wasn't the calculated charm she had once employed to navigate difficult conversations, but something more genuine, a hard-won self-awareness that acknowledged past mistakes without seeking easy absolution. "Why did you keep my business plan?" I asked suddenly, the question that had lingered since her earlier revelation. "After you left, why keep it all those years?" Lauren was silent for a long moment, her gaze fixed on the distant horizon where the city lights melded with the dark waters of the harbor. "At first, it was a reminder of what I was leaving behind," she said finally. "Then, as Summit grew, it became evidence of my mistake, tangible proof that I had chosen wrongly." She turned to face me, her expression unguarded in the softened evening light. "And eventually, it became a kind of talisman, a connection to the person who had believed in something impossible and made it real." The vulnerability in her answer caught me off guard. Throughout our marriage, Lauren had rarely revealed such unfiltered emotion, preferring the security of pragmatism over the uncertainty of deeper feelings. "You could have reached out," I said, "before the reunion, before Thomas's agency failed." "Would you have answered?" She countered gently. I considered the question honestly. "Probably not." She smiled, a hint of sadness in the gesture. "Exactly. And I wouldn't have deserved it if you had." She straightened slightly, professional composure returning. "But that's the past. What matters now is that I am part of Summit's present, contributing to its future. That's more than I expected, and certainly more than I deserved." Before I could respond, her phone buzzed with a message. She glanced at it briefly. The advance copies of tomorrow's Financial Times feature are available. They want quotes from both of us on the founder's journey concept. Just like that, the moment shifted back to business, personal revelations carefully set aside in favor of professional priorities. It was the pattern we had established and maintained throughout her tenure at Summit, intimate disclosures followed by deliberate retreat to safer corporate territory. "Send me the journalist's contact information," I said, matching her professional tone. "I'll provide a statement tonight." Lauren nodded, turning to leave, but paused at the terrace doorway. "Jack," she said softly, "whatever happens with my position at Summit after the probationary review, I want you to know I'm grateful for these months, for the chance to see what I couldn't see before." After she left, I remained on the terrace, contemplating her words and the complex evolution of our relationship. Lauren's probationary period would end in 2 weeks, requiring a formal decision about her permanent role at Summit. From a purely business perspective, the decision was clear. Her performance had been exceptional, her value to the company undeniable. But the personal complications remained. Her impending divorce removed one layer of complexity, while potentially adding others. The boundaries we had established were functioning within the current parameters, but would they withstand a shift to a permanent arrangement? And beneath these practical considerations ran a more fundamental question. What did I really want from Lauren's presence at Summit? Was it merely professional contribution, delayed validation, or something more complex that neither of us had fully acknowledged? The Singapore launch would mark not just Summit's expansion milestone, but a turning point in my relationship with Lauren, professional and perhaps personal. Whatever decision I made about her future with the company would inevitably shape my own as well. The official opening of Summit Singapore exceeded all expectations. Global media coverage was overwhelmingly positive. Bookings surpassed projections by 30%, and several prominent investors expressed interest in our future Asian developments. By any measure, it was Summit's most successful launch to date. Lauren's marketing strategy had proven brilliant, with the founder's journey concept resonating deeply across our target demographics. As we returned to San Francisco headquarters, her 3-month probationary period was drawing to a close, requiring a formal evaluation and decision about her permanent role. Alan delivered his assessment the morning after our return, his earlier skepticism notably absent from his recommendation. "She's earned the position," he stated plainly, sliding a formal evaluation across my desk. "The numbers don't lie. Brand engagement is up 42%. Press coverage has doubled in quality. Placements and the Singapore launch strategy will likely become a case study in luxury marketing." "And the Thomas situation?" I asked. Alan shrugged. "Their divorce is finalized. Legal found no evidence of information sharing, and frankly, her work speaks for itself." After he left, I reviewed the evaluation. Though the decision had essentially made itself, from a purely business perspective, Lauren had more than proven her value to Summit. The question that remained was whether I could separate business judgment from personal history, whether having my ex-wife permanently embedded in my company was sustainable for either of us. That evening, I asked Lauren to meet me at the rooftop garden of our San Francisco property. The setting was deliberately neutral, neither my office nor anywhere too intimate, a space that balanced professional with personal, just as we had been attempting to do. She arrived precisely on time, dressed in a simple black dress that suggested she understood this wasn't strictly a business meeting. The setting sun cast a golden glow across the cityscape behind her as she joined me near the edge of the terrace. "Your probationary period ends tomorrow," I began without preamble. Lauren nodded, her expression calm, though I noticed the slight tension in her shoulders. "I know. Alan recommends offering you a permanent position. The entire executive team agrees. And you? She asked quietly. What do you recommend? The question hung between us, weighted with more than professional implications. I studied her in the fading light, the woman who had once dismissed my dreams, who had walked away when things were difficult, who had returned seeking redemption, and had earned it through exceptional work rather than appeals to our past. I think, I said carefully, that the marketing director who conceived and executed the Singapore launch strategy would be an asset to Summit's future. Lauren's expression remained measured, professional. And the fact that she's your ex-wife? That's the complexity we need to address, I acknowledged. Not for the company's sake, but for ours. Lauren's professional mask slipped slightly as she turned to face the sunset, gathering her thoughts. When she looked back at me, there was a vulnerability in her expression I'd rarely seen during our marriage, let alone our professional relationship. I joined Summit seeking redemption, she said quietly, a chance to contribute to what I should have believed in from the beginning. And have you found it? I asked. She smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes. I've found something more valuable. Perspective. She gestured toward the cityscape before us. 5 years ago, at that reunion, I thought I knew what success looked like, what security meant. I was wrong on both counts. I moved to stand beside her at the railing, close but not touching. And now I understand what you were building, all along, she said simply. Not just hotels or a company, but a vision that was worth the risk, worth believing in. She paused, choosing her words carefully. I should have seen it then. The admission hung between us, both professional assessment and personal regret woven together in ways that couldn't be neatly separated. When you first approached me about the job, I said, part of me wanted to hire you just to show you what you'd walked away from, to prove you wrong. Lauren nodded, accepting this without defensiveness. I deserved that. Maybe, I acknowledged, but that's not why I'm offering you the permanent position now. You've earned it through exceptional work, regardless of our history. Thank you, she said quietly. That means more than you know. A comfortable silence settled between us as the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the horizon. In that moment, something shifted, not dramatically, but perceptibly. The carefully maintained boundaries began to soften, not erased, but perhaps no longer necessary in the same rigid way. I have a condition, I said finally, for accepting the permanent role. Lauren raised an eyebrow, waiting. Dinner, I said simply. Not as CEO and marketing director, not to discuss business, just dinner. Her lips curved into a surprised smile. Are you asking me on a date, Jack? I'm suggesting we start over, I clarified. Not from the beginning, we can't erase our history. But perhaps from this point forward, as the people we are now, rather than who we were then. Lauren considered this for a moment, her expression thoughtful. The people we are now, she repeated softly. I'd like that. As city lights began twinkling, below us, I realized that what had begun as vindication, my ex-wife, working in the empire she once dismissed, had evolved into something more meaningful. Not simply redemption or closure, but possibility, the chance to rewrite not our past, but our future. Tomorrow then, I said. 7 o'clock. Lauren nodded, her smile widening. I accept both offers, the job and dinner. As we left the rooftop, gardened together, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this point, from high school sweethearts to bitter exes to colleagues, and now, something yet to be defined. Life had a way of bringing things full circle, though never quite, in the way you expected. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.